When it occurred to me early last year, some time ago, that WTM this year would be taking place just ahead of the Paris conference on climate change, I decided that we needed to address the carbon issue seriously. And I gambled on putting carbon in 3 places on the World Travel Market agenda. So it's on this afternoon. The Stephen Sacker interview's tomorrow morning, and if you're not going to be there, you're going to miss a very, I think, interesting and lively session with a presentation from Kevin Anderson, and I think what will inevitably be a very lively Stephen Sacker interview. And then I'm chairing a debate which I hope will be even livelier tomorrow afternoon. But we have to face the fact, I think, that carbon is no longer easy to get people to take seriously. At the very time that the issue gets more serious for us, we're losing purchase on people's time and interest. People are just saying, oh, we've heard all that before. But the problem is, although we have heard all of that before, we clearly have, there's nothing really new on the carbon agenda. The problem is that the issue is getting more serious for all of us. So we will struggle on. Thank you all for coming. Please bring 5 friends with you on Wednesday morning. That would be great. Because somehow we need to get people to pay attention to what is a really serious issue for all of us. But this afternoon is going to be full of optimism. I hope. So Callum, the most optimistic presentation you've given for a long time, please.
Okay.
I know that's a tall order. Thanks, Callum. I should have said, Callum is a colleague from Manchester Metropolitan University. He works in the...
You can't remember Manchester Metropolitan University Centre for Air Transport and the Environment.
Callum, I can't remember my sister's name at the moment.
That's all right. I've met your sister. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me. Semi-optimistic, but we have no choice, is my argument. So, everybody knows that the climate is changing. Some people still debate why it is changing and who's responsible. I mean, in some ways, it's a little irrelevant, because if climate change is going to happen, we need to deal with it. Big organisations, big industry know better than any others about the climate challenge, and they have very highly paid senior staff looking at how climate change will threaten their organisation in the future. We've just completed a PhD study for the World Duty Free Group, and their chief executive said to me, I need to know what the threat is to my business 20, 30 years out. So there's no question that industry knows about the problem, and it's in their own interests to develop new business models, new low-carbon development strategies. No problem about that. But my argument, and I keep coming back to the fact that there are some limitations on what can be done, and part of this is getting the consumer to accept and participate in change. So the question which I want to leave with you at the end of this presentation is, can the industry drive sustainable change, or does it need to wait until the consumer demands it? And can it use its wonderful marketing expertise to actually drive some of this change? We're going to hear later about the amazing things that are being done in hotels. There's a lot of work going on there, because CO2 emissions arise from absolutely everything that is associated with the operation of every organisation. But as consumers, we tend to only see a soft engagement between the industry and ourselves when we go to the loo. And there's this little sign that says, if you'd like to save the planet, leave the towels on the rack. If you want to feel guilty and you feel bad, put them on the floor and we'll give you a new one. Now, that is very important, because it's engaging people and getting them to think. But the problem is, it's only one tiny, tiny bit of what the industry is doing. and the public don't know about all the other activities that are being done on their behalf. But actually, we should be telling the public about what is being done for them. Now, if I look, I work on aviation, and on the right-hand side, you can see a WTO breakdown of the carbon implications of the tourism industry. And about 3/4 of it arises from transport. Actually, for some resorts, it's 99.999% of it. Because if you're somewhere like the Solomon Islands or the Maldives, the vast majority of the carbon emissions associated with your operation is actually the passengers flying halfway across the world to come to you, to the resort. And there is a perfect correlation between the growth in air transport and the growth in international tourism. And the aviation industry has done amazing things to improve its technologies. But when you look at these improvements, they're getting harder and harder to deliver. So if I walk away from the microphone and shout, if you look between 1950 and 1970, amazing improvements in the fuel efficiency of aircraft and carbon emissions. But if you look what's happened since the 1980s, while it's got better and more and more and more has been spent on the technologies, it's getting harder to deliver improvement. Because lifting 400 tons of metal up into the sky and propelling it at 1,000 kilometers per hour is very energy intensive. So this beautiful beast here, the A380, has the same fuel consumption per passenger kilometer as a small family car. But, ... in 1 year, that one aeroplane uses the same fuel as 250,000 cars. So the technologies in the industry are amazing, but it's still very carbon intensive. And underpinning the tourism industry is the air transport industry. Governments around the world are trying to deliver an 80% in CO2 emissions by 2050. Right-hand graph there. But left-hand graph there shows you that the emissions from the air transport industry are going to rise for the next 20 or 30 years before they start to come down again. So air transport is in a really difficult position. But airline operators, including the likes of TUI, Thompson, etc., Thomas Cook, etc., are making incredible efforts to reduce the weight of their planes. And there are lots, you don't really need to know them, but lightweight seats, taking the in-flight entertainment magazines out of the aircraft, all sorts of things to reduce weight. Even double cleaning the aircraft, because you get enough of the aircraft in the second cleaning to save fuel. Just leaving, we've seen these statistics that if you leave a sachet of sugar under the seat for a year, it costs $23 in fuel or something like this. So there's amazing technological improvements. There's amazing efforts being made by the industry to improve. But unfortunately, the customers are demanding more, particularly on long-haul flights. So you see advertisements like this, which is the airlines trying to placate and encourage that they get their customers to fly with them. And also, and it raises this question of, we see green consumerism in the high street. You can buy the coffee in a plastic bag rather than a coffee in a glass jar. But the trouble is, when you're flying on holiday, people would rather have the Etihad experience than the Ryanair experience. They'd rather pay the Ryanair price but have the Etihad experience. So the consumer is a constraint to the industry being able to do more. And we've worked with Thompson on looking at the potential to encourage passengers to bring less in their suitcases. If you take one beach towel out of every customer's suitcase, you save 50 some odd million pounds a year in fuel and equivalent in emissions. So there is amazing potential, but it requires that we take the customers with us. So sustainable development, the carbon challenge, is to be environmentally sustainable, to be commercially sustainable, not lose any business, to be operationally sustainable and meet customer expectations. And the big problem, I think, for our holidays is this line here. I'm going on my bloody holidays. Don't bug me with climate change and other issues now. I only get 2 weeks a year. I want to go away guilt-free. So there is a really big challenge for the industry. But my argument is we should be building upon what the industry is doing, making a lot of noise about the benefits of what the industry is doing, acknowledging that this is not enough, the technology is not enough, the operations, and with every sector, talking to the consumer, actually these carbon emissions are your emissions. You bought the ticket, they're your emissions. And we need, in my belief, to use the marketing skills from the whole industry to begin to talk to our consumers and encourage them to demand from us greener products and services. Was that optimistic enough for you? Half and half.
Actually, remarkably optimistic, I thought, Callum, given the scale of the problem that we confront. And it links very neatly with what I haven't seen Elizabeth's presentation, so I don't know. But I know a bit about Manchester Central. One of the things I know about Manchester Central is that the slides are always beautiful. But I think it probably links very closely to what you're going to talk about, which is...
Just this one?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
That one's probably easier.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Consumer choice.
Thank you. A positive presentation, I do hope. I'm going to talk to you from a business tourism perspective. Manchester Central is the largest convention centre in the north of England, and it's how we embrace best practice from a sustainable perspective. Manchester Central is an award-winning international convention centre. We host over 100 events a year. We bring over 500,000 visitors and delegates to the city region every year. We host a variety of events. You will have seen us on the 10 o'clock news a couple of weeks ago every evening for a week when we hosted the Conservative Party conference. And all sorts of events from the international associations right through to ITV's latest sporting extravaganza, Ninja Warrior, for any of you that have seen that on a Saturday night. Although our business is very positive with regards to its impact on the local economy, we continually strive to minimise the negative impact our events might have on the environment. And Manchester Central has paved its way from a sustainable perspective to be industry leading in reducing its emissions and increasing carbon efficiency. We initially made our mark back in 2013 by being the first non-Olympic venue to achieve 2012-1 status, ISO 2012-1. And we've now gone on to be the only venue that has the 3 ISO standards of 14,001 from an international environmental management perspective and 9,001, the quality management award. To reach this success, we have overhauled our business and embedded corporate social responsibility at the heart of everything we do in order to reduce that negative and boost that positive impact. For those of you that are not familiar with Manchester Central, let me get through. We're an award. Previously, we were a train shed that linked the great cities of the UK all across the country, and to turn a building that's 130 years old into a sustainable convention centre is no mean feat. The strides that we've made over the past few years have allowed us to compete against those purpose-built sustainable venues. Some of our initial projects involved increasing carbon efficiencies with the aim of just improving the bottom line. To kick things off, some straightforward things. We replaced the air conditioning units. We introduced a water purification system. We introduced sensors on all of our lights that were so that when people walked in, they turned on and off. Our venue is 23,000 square metres of space, and that uses an awful lot of energy. We have 160 smart meters now, which allow us to precisely monitor our water, our gas, and our electricity. And these technologies allow us now to produce reports for our clients. So every client that comes into Manchester Central can know exactly what their carbon footprint is. And it allows them the support and the infrastructure to improve on that year on year whenever they go to another venue or if they come back to us on the following year. Another of our industry-leading initiatives has been a recycling centre in Manchester. It is the only one in the city centre that not only sorts but manages its waste on site. And this initiative has allowed us to actually to allow that area to become revenue generating. Not hundreds of thousands of pounds, but slowly we are bringing in tens of thousands of pounds that wasn't there before into our business. Around 80% of our corporate clients now ask us about our sustainable credentials. They're asking when they inquire with us, what are our ISO awards? What's our sustainability policy? What do we do with our unused food? That has been increasing. I've been in post now for 4 years. Year on year, we've seen that steady increase. And it's allowing us to win some really big brands that only will put those business into places that have strong sustainable credentials. As well as significantly reducing the negative impact on our business, the like-minded clients have supported us through the media coverage that we're getting. This year, we hosted the annual Congress Society of Ecological Restoration. This was business that we won on the back of our sustainable awards. This business brings £4 million into the city region's economy. Next week, we're hosting the Green Build Expo for the 7th year running. That type of event could only take place in a business like ours that has that level of sustainable credentials. Manchester Central is a significant landmark of historical status, and it's an exemplar project in itself of being a regeneration project. Its geographical location in the heart of the city means that it has possibly the strongest low carbon credentials, as in everyone can get there via public transport and they can walk to the hotels and the restaurants very easily once they arrive. We believe our sustainable practices win us business, they generate additional resources, and by us embracing technology, we're saving money. Thank you very much.
I don't think any of the presentations tomorrow will be as positive as that. So, Fran. We should congratulate you.
Thank you very much.
Fran has been promoted since last year. She's now Director of the International Tourism Partnership. Are you going to tell us about best practices in hotels?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Harold. So just to introduce, I always get this wrong, sorry. Introduce ITP. If you don't know ITP, we're a member organisation, we're not for profits, and our members are hotel companies, and it's all about bringing the sector together to collaborate on social and environmental issues. So we're not consultants, but we are all about identifying where we need to work together with our members. And our membership is very diverse, so we have 17 member companies listed here. These are located anywhere between Las Vegas and Hong Kong, anything between 2 properties and over 7,000. So with that kind of reach of over 25,000 hotels globally, we do have the ear and the engagement of a significant part of the hotel sector. Carbon is one of the issues that we work on. Obviously, that's what I'm talking about today. But our other themes include youth employment, human trafficking, water, and labour standards. But what about carbon? I'm going to talk today just a little bit about what general approaches we would recommend to hoteliers wanting to engage in the journey of looking at reducing their carbon emissions. That approach then followed by some case studies of those particular examples, and also then broader what we have done as ITP with the sector to drive things forward. And bring in something a little bit new, I think, as well. So I think the first stage for any business is to really look at where your emissions occur. What are your most significant drivers of climate change? So identifying those will help you reduce those. This widely referenced study by a core hotel group looked at a wide variety of emissions across the hotel sector. You'll see here with the arrow that 66% of carbon emissions, unsurprisingly in hotels, are through the site energy. But that still leaves a third of the emissions in other areas as well. So highlighting that it's not just through energy efficiency schemes that you can start to reduce your footprint. 14% here in food and beverage, 8% in employee travel, and other is 12% there. Looking at what the biggest impacts in sort of the energy sector, but really depends where you are. If you are in a warm climate, you might have the highest energy demand through your air conditioning system, for example. Other areas, it might be lighting. Those two sort of vie for the top place in terms of where you can start to reduce your emissions. And you'll see the small diagram here is from ITP's Environmental Management for Hotels manual, which shows businesses how they can start to map where their biggest emissions are. But it's really critical then to see, okay, so we've got the biggest impact areas, but where are we going to get traction on these things? What can we do as a business? So what do we control? Well, we control the building and how those systems operate. We can influence our suppliers and in terms of other actors who can help us reduce our environmental impacts, reduce our carbon footprint. How do we incentivize or motivate our guests and our staff to join us? It's not just about capital investment, but capital investment is one of the most rapid ways that you can reduce your carbon emissions. You'll see the example here in terms of the huge reduction that the Hong Kong and Shanghai hotels achieved through replacing chillers. And it doesn't take a genius in maths to say that, okay, 41.4 million investment returning an annual saving of 52.7 million on energy costs is a pretty good payback period by anybody's terms. And you'll see this again and again. The payback period for a lot of energy efficiency schemes is pretty quick. All these examples from host hotels, I won't go into all the detail of them, it's sort of highly technical, but they have delivered significant monetary savings in a period of 1 to 3 years. And people say, well, why isn't more of this happening? Frankly, you've got to have that money to invest. And I was talking to Director of Engineering at one of the Hyatt properties and said, yeah, the payback for an LED project might be within a year, but you've still got to persuade your chief finance officer that you're going to spend £68,000 on light bulbs, and that's a good thing. So sometimes that's the case, building the business case, and for the smaller businesses as well, having that capital investment might not be possible. However, operations, now talking to one of the senior engineering staff at Hilton, said that just through conducting walkarounds of buildings, just looking at the management systems, looking actually what is going on in the property, how are we operating this this technology that we have, delivered 65% savings just through low or no cost options, and actually getting more of the team on board. So not leaving it all to the engineers or the sustainability teams, the green teams, but saying to the catering staff or the security staff about switching off lights, about identifying leaks in water and things like that. So by getting a team spirit together, really sort of picked off a lot of low-hanging fruit there and sort of smaller projects where they could really get traction. It's not all about technology. You can have the best technology in the world, but if people don't use it properly, there you go. Looking wider then, outside of your own doors, Whitbread, who run Premier Inn, looked at their, what in terms of furniture and fittings, Where are these big impacts? The beds, because the bed's probably the biggest piece of kit in a hotel room. So what about the carbon footprint of the bed? How can we work with our suppliers to, first of all, know what that impact is and then start to reduce it through better distribution channels, through cleverer use of materials and use of less materials. You see 89.4% of the carbon footprint of the bed was in the material. So there's a huge opportunity there for these fixtures and fittings, which are commonly changed, to be included when you're looking at the carbon footprint. Don't just look at, say, the energy profile. In terms of incentivising, I'm not going to talk about towels, Jeremy. Very grateful. We always talk about towels. The West in Singapore introduced green rooms where they had actually sort of meters in the rooms to say, right, whether you were performing better or worse compared to other guests on that floor. If you performed 20% lower than the average, you would get points on your loyalty points, or they would make donations to charity. So really innovative and engaging and getting a bit of competition going, much more interesting for guests than those infuriating towel washing options. And staff as well, we already talked about that in terms of the Hilton example, and I think that when we hear from the Hotel Verde, they've just got the best staff engagement. Look at their videos online in terms of just raising awareness, getting the staff on board, getting them engaged and giving them rewards. Staff turnover is very quick in hotels. You have to keep doing this, you have to keep the motivation, but things like there's a hotel in Richmond which incentivise staff to reduce food waste. We saw there 14% of carbon footprint in food and beverage. If you can reduce your food waste, again, you're reducing your carbon footprint. It's not all about energy. Measurement. Where are we in the bigger picture on this? So how can a hotel sort of know where they are in the grand scheme of things? They need to measure their carbon footprint, first of all, and with the organisation behind the Hotel Carbon Measurement Initiative, which is a common way for measuring and reporting on the carbon footprint of a hotel stay. Well, you've got the figure then, so what? Is your figure of 32 kilos per room night good? Didn't know that until recently, and this is the new thing that we are delighted to have recently launched, is the hotel footprinting tool, which enables you to look up anywhere in the world, what the range of carbon footprints is, where data is available, so that you can see if you run a hotel, where you fit in the grand scheme of things. Are you, in the higher or the lower section? If you're a corporate customer, you can actually download a report then, say, right, all my business travel I want to be able to report on in my CDP response. You can do that. So it's putting that information of around about 5,000 hotels worldwide in a user-friendly form. And this is based on real data as well. We've not cooked up some estimate. This is only going to develop as we go along. So hopefully, that will have great traction. In terms of resources, we share our wider resources freely to the public on our Green Hotelier website, so the environmental management for hotels there, which I alluded to before, as well as a lot of case studies about hotels, freely available there. We do this, we work with the main players in the hotel sector, but our outputs are always freely available. It's always about getting traction and driving the sector forward. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Fran. Sarah, Fran's given you quite a lot to live up to with Hotel Verde. I've stayed at the Hotel Verde a couple of times. It is a really exciting hotel. Not only is it carbon efficient, which you're going to hear about, but it's also a great place to stay.
That's the right answer.
Hotel Verde was the winner of our Green Hotelier's Best Hotel Award this year as well.
Hello everybody, my name's Sarah. And so I'm going to just talk a little bit about Hotel Verde, which if you didn't know is in Cape Town, South Africa. So The mandate really from the beginning, from pre-design phase, was that we were going to be Africa's greenest hotel. We wanted to really prove that two things: sustainability and luxury don't have to be mutually exclusive. And secondly, that sustainability can really exist in any setting. So being an airport hotel, this is something we could prove that sustainability didn't have to be in an eco-lodge, it could also be at an airport hotel. So we tried to really make sustainability the culture as opposed to just a part of the culture. And this really led to a very holistic approach to sustainability as a whole. So you can see a list here of some of the things that we've done. It's not really an exhaustive list, but it's a very good overview of what we've tried to achieve at the hotel. So we utilized passive design strategies. We installed active systems, but then also utilizing stringent operating practices so that we could try and modify staff behavior through training, through incentivizing the staff, as well as changing and modifying guest behavior through, as she spoke about, incentives as well. So for the purpose of this presentation, I really wanted to more focus on three elements, that being the energy efficiency, the waste, and then lastly our carbon offsetting as well. So if you look at our energy efficiency, you can see here this is a graph which displays our kilowatt hours per square meter per annum. So Hotel Verde runs at 83 kilowatts square meters per annum. And that, if you look at the South African National Code, which is actually 600 kilowatt hours per square meter per annum, not a very, very good benchmark. But if you look at the LEED model benchmark as well, which is the third-party green building certification system, you can see that we are quite low and we've got actually a very, very good running energy. So how do we achieve that? First and foremostly through renewable energy generation. We have the wind turbines, we've got photovoltaic panels, we've got regenerative drive lifts, and cumulatively that makes up for about 10.6% of our total energy demand. We also have, funny enough, some gym equipment which can also power some energy, but that really is a negligible amount and is really there for the guest engagement as well. Then we've obviously got our active systems. So for example, the fact that we've installed a geothermal loop system. So we have a very efficient heating and cooling system which is coupled to ground source heat pumps. And then obviously our operating practices as well, where we again are engaging guests and staff. So we have an incentive program where our guests can earn Verdinos. And if they, reuse their towels, they can earn a Verdino. But if they also don't use their air conditioning, they can do the same. So if you look at the total energy saved by the hotel, it was enough to power 215 mid-income houses for a year in Cape Town. Then you look at our waste management. So we have a zero waste to landfill goal. And if you look at the average for the financial year, we reached an 87% waste diversion rate. Pretty good, but not quite where we want to be yet. So our strategy is really to look at the entire life cycle of waste. So to look first and foremost at preventing. What is the impact on, the production of that product, on the transport of that product, on the packaging of that product, as well as the disposal of that product, and then only go on to minimization, and lastly, reuse, recycle. We also really looked at recycling in the building phase as well. So we used dematerialization, using rapidly renewable products within the building as well. And very, very big on the waste is the staff participation. So getting up to management staff in the waste area, where they actually have to sort the waste themselves and they see and have to deal with the waste on a daily basis. It's very important. Then just looking at our actual carbon footprint. So we acknowledge that whilst we have a very, much lower carbon footprint maybe than another hotel of the same size, this isn't quite enough for us to achieve carbon neutrality. So we teamed up with a sustainability specialist, Impact Choice, who provided us with a solution where we could offset our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, basically emissions we are directly responsible for. And we were able to do this by purchasing certified carbon credits, which goes to financially benefiting a project which has real value in decreasing emissions in a sustainable and socially responsible manner. And what's nice is that we were able to do the greenhouse gas audit of the hotel, and we were able to see our carbon footprint, which is 946.14 metric tons of CO2e. We were then able to completely offset this, which ended up meaning we were able to divert an equivalent of about 5.3 million kilograms of coal burned. It's just a nice way to look at it. So Impact Choice has a very special solution which we use, and that is that we can send the guest a carbon offset certificate to their email after their stay or after their conference. And then they can see that their stay or conference was 100% carbon neutral during. And this is something that many conference delegates and corporates are actually starting to use the hotel purely or largely based on the fact that they are able to mitigate their emissions during their stay. Something that everybody tends to ask is really the economic viability of a program where you've done so much to be sustainable. And we really tried to do every step, but yet it was only about 10.8% of the total budget that was allocated to the sustainable interventions. So if you look just at the monthly savings, which is attributed to the fact that we have obviously diverted the energy, water, and sewer savings. So that is about $11,455 a month. So that is just by avoiding that through our grey water recycling system, through the fact that we use the geothermal field, for example. And this might not seem like an attractive number, but based on that intervention alone, it's about 128 months. But this doesn't take into account the fact that we've had a hugely massive PR exposure. We have exceeded our occupancy budget. We have exceeded our revenue budget massively. And this is really thanks to the fact that guests really enjoy their stay in a sustainable place. They want to return because of that feel-good factor as well. And whilst this might not be quite quantifiable, it exists, and our return guest portfolio is so high because of that. Also, the staff are much happier and proud to work in a place where the guests continue to go to TripAdvisor to say these things and to actually talk specifically about the sustainable interventions. And we've really felt that this has provided us with such a successful business case that we've moved on to now wanting to replicate that. So we've started a hotel management company now. We will be moving forward with Thrivable Hospitality Solutions. So we will manage hotels that are purely built or renovated to be sustainable, followed by the sustainable operating practices. Because as was said before, if you don't operate a building sustainably, it's not as effective as if it weren't. And so we really want to look at optimizing that practice right from within the hotel itself, but also that each hotel going forward is more energy efficient, more water efficient, more carbon efficient, and also more economically viable than the predecessor. And so we also hope to bring out this conversation with other hoteliers to be very open and honest with all of our figures and transparent about our communication so that we can really open a discussion to move towards a more economically viable and sustainable way for hotels. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sarah. I think it's a mark of the times that presentation was given by the marketing manager. If you think back 10 or 15 years, that would have been almost unthinkable that somebody could have done that. So thank you very much. Who's got the first question? Can we have the microphone here, please? Just the lady here.
Thanks. Brenda from Marine Dynamics Can't Spy. I just have a question, and I think it possibly comes up in one of the other talks, but especially to Hotel Verde, how is your challenge, especially in South Africa, with getting the staff to think like this? Because, I'm sure that's, a lot of people don't care. I mean, we work in a conservation environment. We've constantly challenged with getting our staff to understand why they need to recycle, why they need to save here, do this, why the light bulbs, why no paper towels, etc., etc. So how have you found that challenge in South Africa particularly?
It's a very tough one, I have to admit, and it's something that we have struggled with. And we really implemented an in-house drive called Avanti, which is moving forward in Italian, to try and really to get them to engage with the concepts on a basic level. So, for example, sending them to landfill sites to actually see the examples. But also what's something that we're going to be doing next year is actually attaching an incentive to a bonus as well. So they can potentially earn a full 13th check if we reach our 90% waste diverted from landfill. So again, it's not the best way to incentivize the staff, but what we found is that they really start to become proud of it. when you start engaging with them on a base level. So monthly trainings, refreshing, looking at it in every way that you can. Also interdepartmental competitions is another way that we do it. So where they start having fun with it and changing up the theme. So one month you theme it energy, 1 month you theme it waste, and you have lots of, visual collateral put up about, the different things that they can do on a personal level as well as in the office. And that we've found to be quite successful so far.
Can we come to the lady here?
So you have talked about environmental management system and greener buildings, green transport. But what do you think would be or should be the priorities with the tourism industry? Should it be environmental management systems with ISO standards and things like this? Or should it be more focused on new technologies and greener transport, greener buildings?
Elizabeth, do you want to take that first and then go to Callum?
I think it's got to be both, both for a convention centre or for any venues. I think yes, a tandem approach is definitely going to be the best approach because it's going to deliver those returns to the bottom line inevitably. The challenges come around the complexities of all the different ISOs, green awards. This is what we found in Manchester. That as Howard referenced at the beginning, that there is some of the tourism business are a little bit tired of all the kind of green wash, and that is a shame really. We're now at that stage where we could do with some clarity across the board, so that we're all going in the same direction as a city region, as a country. That's something that we're really struggling with at the moment.
Fran, I will come back to you, Callum, but Fran, do you want to just comment on that issue of the way in which these things are reported? Because that's an area you've done a lot of work on now.
In terms of?
Well, the ITP carbon measurement tool, for example.
Yeah, I think so. And I think you say management systems are good, but in terms of, sort of framing an issue. But see, the key is really to get consistent measuring and reporting across sectors. Companies very much operate in silos, and that can be useful for them because you create your own reporting system, you create your own figures, and nobody can say whether that's good or not. I think what we've been driving with the sector is, the need to come together and have a consistent way, and it's not to, expose people in any way. It's actually to accelerate the learning because people can see where they stand and see where the holes are. And in terms of priorities going forward, I think it's, we are in a growing sector, and the challenge is to decouple the environmental impact from sector growth, because otherwise even if we're getting more efficient, we're still increasing our burden on the planet as a sector.
Fran, am I right in thinking that one of the reasons you were able to introduce that was pressure from the consumer? In a way, Callum's point, that it was the corporate consumers looking for conferences that actually drove the creation of that tool.
Yeah, absolutely. In corporate requests for proposals, repeatedly people asking what is the carbon footprint, what is the water footprint of a stay or a meeting, and it's great to hear Elizabeth saying that these questions are being answered. We're not quite sure what people are doing with that information at the moment, but if we can provide better information, we can make people better able to use that information and not just ask the question as a corporate tick box, but to be able to use it, for example, with the hotel footprint tool there, that they can report on their own business travel emissions. So it really is driving change, and it's great to see that is corporate customer-led.
Callum, do you want to add, or are you?
Just a couple of quick points. A sustainable business is one which looks upstream to its suppliers and downstream to what happens to its waste, and takes a holistic view about its position, everything that's associated with its operation. So the tourism industry cannot cut itself off from the transport industry that supplies it, nor for the other suppliers. And the carbon challenge is so great. I mean, in the UK, we've got 25 years and we're meant to have cut our carbon emissions by 80%. Globally, 50% between 1990 and 2050. It's a massive challenge. So every single sector needs to deal with it. And the solutions, to summarize, are infrastructure, technology, business models, and most importantly, awareness building and motivation of staff and consumers. So it's a holistic process.
Can I go for another question? We could come here and then here. Shall I do it?
Patricia, working with Hosteling International. So I had a question for you, Madame Hughes, concerning this benchmarking tool that you presented. I thought it was a really interesting initiative. I wanted to know, how do you, because you spoke about consistency, is the information about the carbon footprint collected by the hotels or by the ITP? And how do you make sure that they all use the same methods and the same tools to verify that? Thank you.
Very, very good question. Thank you. The data actually comes from the annual Cornell University Hotel Sustainability Benchmarking Study. The data is submitted by hotel companies and then goes through a verification process, not at the individual property level. That would not be possible, but the participating companies all use the Hotel Carbon Measurement Initiative, so we know that the inputs are consistent across. What the tool then delivers is a variety of different metrics, because depending on what you want to know, floor area might be a useful metric, or we can look at sort of property level, and then that is consistent across the board. Some of the variations you have to bear in mind will be driven by emission factors. A hotel in France, for example, which is largely nuclear fuel, will always be a lot lower than a hotel in China. So these kind of things have to be taken into account. The service level, there is some differentiation between different service levels, which you can look at as well. So we try to make the information as useful as possible on that.
I work for the Sustainable Tourism Division, the Ministry of Tourism in Egypt. I'll have a few comments and a question for you first, Ms. Farrell. On the 83 kilowatt hours per year per square meter, isn't that a function of the occupancy? I mean, whether the room is occupied 365 days or a portion thereof?
Yes, we did look at it. That was initially based on like a 70% average occupancy. And we actually recently did an audit, and it's slightly higher now. And it's actually because our occupancy has been a lot better than expected.
Okay, and for Mr. Thomas, you showed one slide for JW Marriott, where they're talking about saving water, I think.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. We had an experience with JW Marriott in Egypt. We have a green certification program for hotels. And as we were going through the certification with them, we ran into a case where they said they cannot use any motion sensors in the reception area or turn the lights even during the daylight hours, because it's against corporate policy, because it's a high-end hospitality. And that just drives exactly opposite to the concept of sustainability. Same thing about the cards in the room. They're just totally against it. Marriott would, but JW wouldn't. Last comment that I would appreciate any of you four to respond to is the issue of the tour operators. In Egypt, we're finding out it's not only the supply side and it's not only the infrastructure. You can build a very efficient hotel, but if you don't have a tour operators that markets your rooms for you in the European markets, you can whistle in the wind all you want, but you're going to get $20 a night.
Could I? It's funny. I've just come back from teaching in Abu Dhabi, and the idea of getting, whether it's the airline or the tour operators, whatever, to try and market green behaviour there is a waste of time. But in other parts of the world, it would be applicable. I think I'd love to see the minds who market and sell airlines, tour operators, the whole lot, put their minds to how can we sell that this product is superior. This is exactly what you've said. It's a more responsible, but it's actually a quality product. And there's a maturity about sustainability. If you look to the richest parts of the world, more people take public transport because they've used public transport, they've had private cars, and then they've now moved back to public transport. And to demand very high-end bling, more than you actually need, is something that we need to try and persuade people isn't a measure of how important they are. Yeah, it'll take a lot of time, and it's culturally specific. But I think the marketing people have got the challenge to find what a green story is they have to tell.
Just come in on the point of, you know, the tension between, say, you know, corporate headquarters and different brands and different standards which are enforced. That is always a challenge, and particularly for the major brands, which are largely franchises as well. It's sometimes in terms of what you can get into the brand standards, in terms of operating procedures, and some brands do choose not to have things like linen washing options, and rather the activity is in the back of house, and that just goes to show that sometimes it's, you know, sometimes the more visible things to us are not necessarily always the more meaningful things which are going on, and so the challenge to the hotel sector is to really communicate where the biggest impact areas are.
Thanks, Frank. Can I just see where else there are still questions? Okay, I'm going to gather those three questions together and then come to the panel for a final comment.
Hi, it's Scott Wayne. I run a sustainable tourism consultancy based in Washington, D.C. This is a question for the whole panel. Now, the majority of the tourism industry really hasn't caught on to sustainable tourism yet. If you had to point to one key factor, each of you, would it be mindset, business case? What would you point to? I know Callum laid out a number of key points, but I mean, this has been an uphill battle for many, many years. And you know, what Verde Hotels has laid out and what Sarah has laid out, it makes so much sense. It just seems like it's a no-brainer, should be a no-brainer for the industry and for travelers. So that's my question. Which one factor would you point to?
Thanks, Scott. Where was the other question? Somebody in the middle here. Don?
It's just an observation. We run a small sustainable travel agency in Verde in Switzerland, one of, let's say, the richest country in the world. And it's just a question of marketing and investment, because the state of the hotel industry in Switzerland is really bad. I mean, they never did investment in the past, in the 70s. I mean, the furniture are still in the 70s. Many are old-fashioned, and they are really fragile economically. So what you did is fantastic. We are biologists, so we know exactly all the steps you went through. But we can see around us in the ski resorts industry and all these, what we think, fantastic areas, they have no franc to invest in those things. And they are probably also not as advanced as you are in the philosophy. But I think it's what we call in French le nerf de la guerre. They don't just have the money to just isolate the walls or change a heater for pellets or anything like that. So you need to start from a new project to do that. But what about all those hotels? They just cannot do any investment. So I don't know if there is any solution.
Is there a last question, or is that the... Okay, if we go to the panel then for a final comment from each of you. Fran, do you want to start?
Okay, thank you. I think those 2 points are quite well interlinked. If you're talking about sort of what's the barrier, cost savings are often rapid when you're talking about improving efficiency. So why wouldn't people get that? We've got to stop talking about sustainability in some cases and sort of say about good business management. So I can only think it's sort of a bit of ignorance there in terms of what people can do, or just not having time, which alludes to the second point actually, in terms of, you know, how do you get the investment? But remember that investment is not just about money; it's about time. And I think what businesses need to do is just to invest a little bit more time in looking at what the opportunities are for low and no in many cases, as the Hilton example showed, there are lots of no-cost opportunities. But people if people have to devote time to look at this, regardless of what their motivations are, they can save money.
Elizabeth, is it fair to say that one of the reasons that you've been so successful at Manchester Central is your consumers actually do ask you detailed questions about this?
Yeah, most definitely. We're in a fortunate position as being, you know, a large convention centre. We're dealing with large corporates and large associations, and they get it. And they are really drilling down hard into us now because they absolutely expect those standards from us. We need to be exemplars. We're dealing with those organisations and associations that absolutely expect it. But as we, over the last few years, as we've come out of recession, they're demanding it more and more year on year. And going back to 4 or 5 years ago, they still wanted it, but they didn't want to pay any more for it. As time's going on, they understand, these larger companies, that there is a cost. It's a very different business than the model you were describing in the small hoteliers. But the large organisations are starting to understand that there will be probably costs associated with the fact that they can market and PR, the fact that they're associated with a sustainable venue.
Callum, I'm going to come back to you, but maybe come to Sarah next, because it seems to me that the Hotel Verde is really a family's dream, isn't it? It's really been driven by the family who decided to invest and do this.
No, it definitely was initially a personal choice from the owner. And I think it's been quite eye-opening for everybody to see that. And specifically, we have a lot of American guests who say that they want this and they demand this. And I think the more people realize that the consumer demand is there, they will also start to make these changes. And to your comment as well, just based on the fact that, you know, at any point a hotel needs to renovate and needs to upgrade. And so it's not to say you have to pull the carpet from underneath you and change everything you're doing. But again, pointing to that mind shift change, that every decision going forward, you just keep that lens in front of you, that you're considering it from the consumer point of view, that that's what they're wanting and starting to want, but also that you can think about it just a slightly different manner. And that's really what the owner has inspired us to do.
Callum, can you try and end this on an optimistic note?
Okay, well, I'll tell you, I think it's a pragmatic note. The change that's going to happen in the next 30 years because of climate change in our society, in our economy, is going to be massive. If we're set back here in 30 years' time, we're going to say, oh my God, it's so different. Think of what it was like 30 years ago. It's going to happen. Companies, tourism is no different from any other sector. If you adapt to the threat of climate change, you'll be around in 30 years' time. If you don't, you won't. You'll be out of business. And that's point one. Can I do a second one? Because it's a brief one. If I had to transport your customers halfway around the world to Egypt, it's going to be so expensive in 30 years' time, it won't be possible, except for once every 2-3 years. So the other bit to it is you've got to look at the carbon and the costs of bringing your customers to where you are. And I think it's Thompson that is starting to market holidays in the Maldives in India rather than the UK, because the carbon cost of transporting them there is that much cheaper.
I think the big issue for all of us is whether we will adapt fast enough to solve the problem. Personally, I'm not optimistic, but I'm grateful that the panellists were. We're coming back to the carbon issue tomorrow morning. It's going to be a very lively debate following on from a presentation from Kevin Anderson, which I've seen. It will give everybody in the room, I think, considerable room for thought. Stephen Sacker will then be interviewing or grilling a number of senior people from the industry and from policy making. And then we have a debate which Callum and Fran and some of the other people in the room will be on tomorrow afternoon up in one of the Platinum Suites. So thank you very much for coming to this, and let's thank the panel in the usual way. Thank you very much.